I'm the new program chair, so if you have any ideas about what you would like to see in our programming for the next couple of years, just send me a note, because we're trying to be as flexible and offer programming in as many formats and in as many locations as possible. And now I have the pleasure of introducing Helen Josephine, who you all know. She is the head of the Terman Engineering Library at Stanford. She's also the Mendeley advisor for Stanford's Mendeley institutional account. She's a certified project management professional, and she's very active in SLA and is currently the chair of the Sci-Tech division, and she's also going to be on the conference advisory panel, committee, council for the Vancouver session in 2014. And we're already doing the programming and planning for that. So again, you can funnel information to either one of us on that. And then we have William Gunn, who is the head of academic outreach for Mendeley. He received his PhD from Tulane, where he studied under Dr. Darwin Prokop at the Tulane Center for Gene Therapy. He has been a presenter at conferences such as Strata, the O'Reilly Tools of Change Conference, Science Online, Medicine 2.0, Code for Lib, and he's a regular contributor to the Mendeley blog. And I think what we're going to end up doing is they're going to give short presentations and then open it up for discussion and questions. So think of things that you want to ask as they're going along.
Okay.
It's all yours.
Okay, good. The topic is broadly defined as disruptive tools for research. And among those, we're going to talk about Mendeley, so by William's talking about that. There's another tool called Zotero, and I'm going to talk briefly about that. And then there's altmetrics. So I'm going to start at the altmetrics end of the spectrum. And I realized that for some of you it's like, what the heck is this? So ask lots of questions. That's the whole point of this thing is to get questions going. So you're wondering probably, alt what? Alt what? What is she talking about? So these are alternative metrics to how we value and judge a scholarly article. There's the quote, and this is from Information Today, this month's issue, February 2013. And all of the sites and stuff will be on these slides, and I'll post them up to the blog. You're pretty familiar with citation counting, with impact factors of journals, with reference peer-reviewed. This is extending it beyond that to other ways that scholars communicate now, using tools like Mendeley or blog postings, Twitter. And what is the value of that in evaluating research and looking at the whole research discourse? So that's what altmetrics are. Here's an example from a lab guide from Emory University, which I really like the picture, because it shows the one article in the center, and among it, and referencing to it, there are 24 readers on Mendeley. It's been recommended by the faculty of 1,000. There's been a blog post, 6 bookmarks. So suddenly you find out more about this particular article and where it sits among its peers. So having your work formally cited is a very slow process. Altmetrics are faster and wider ranging measures of how much impact your article has. A lot of people refer back to this altmetrics manifesto, and there's a website that has lots of information. These were 2 research students at North Carolina, and they have an article, of course, in an open source location. And their point was that some of these earlier ways of judging an article are kind of outmoded and really take a lot more time for an article to get cited and get citations. but people may already be reading it and using it and thinking about it, but there's no way to know it. Now there is, with tools like Mendeley and Zotero and others, that allow researchers to share that information. So it's part of that, the newer ecosystem. There is a company in Britain called Altmetric, not to be confused with altmetrics, altmetric, and they have a bookmarklet that you can add to your own personal browser. They primarily work with big publishers and, for instance, Elsevier, to add these additional information about the article to their websites. And I'll show you an example of that in a little bit. But of course, these are what it only works for articles that it can get access to in the public domain. PubMed, any pages that contain already a DOI for the article, and Twitter messages. So this is all very new, as you see, only since July 2011 for the Twitter feeds. Everybody knows what a DOI is, right? Impact Story is another source similar to the people behind the Altmetrics Manifesto have developed Impact Story. So these are all of the metrics that they're looking for on a particular article. So the list is much more comprehensive, and it includes a lot more open source and social media things like Facebook. But some for fee, things like Scopus. And Dryad, which is data sources for life sciences. They're also looking for blog posts. You see also SlideShare. So if your article is referenced in someone's other presentation, they would pick it up that way too. So here's an example of a report from Impact Story. I was looking at this article by a Stanford researcher, optogenetics and neural systems. It's been saved by scholars, 512 readers in Mendeley, cited by scholars, 25 citations in PubMed, and 101 citations in Scopus. And then it's kind of slider to show the relative importance of this article. So it's 97%. It's been cited 97% more than its comparable articles in Scopus. You can go to their site and see some other sample reports that have, a lot more detail. This particular article just had that one to it. I set up a little account for myself, but here's an example of some others where it's highly cited because it has 52 Scopus citations. It's highly recommended because it has, see that? Well, highly recommended because it has not only a faculty of 1,000, but other things listed to it. So it's giving you sort of a snapshot then to look at. And here's the little report that they use. It's very clever the way they've done this. Unfortunately, it's not really good for presentation because it's very lightweight type. That's the new thing. I hate it. But it's showing you saved by scholars, cited by scholars, recommended by scholars that be reviewed somewhere, and then discussed by the public, saved by the public, cited by the public. So in this case, it's been mentioned in Wikipedia. So it really gives you a whole nother perspective on this article than just, okay, it's been cited 10 times in Web of Science. All right. The other interesting thing about Impact Story is, I should be able to do this easily, but I figured out how to do it yet.
Get up to the bottom of the window.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Impact Story is also working now with Highwire Press. So they're going to work with Impact Story and include on the Highwire platform, for those publishers that want to include these kind of metrics on the article level of the journals that Highwire hosts, they'll have these Impact Story information on there. And so the managing director of Highwire said, you know, they want to continue to embrace those kinds of new technologies that scholars are using and make it really obvious and available to the scholars. Okay, another company in the running is Plum Analytics. And this is definitely a for-fee thing. Impact Story is a more research-focused, more open source subscription service. If you look on the web, you'll see some universities that are testing this out. And the people behind this were the developers of the Summons service through Serial Solution. Mike Bushman, I didn't know him, worked for IEEE for a while. So they actually have access then to more of the for-fee content because they are charging a fee for the service. And the metrics are pretty extensive that they cover. So, I wanted to show you how the Public Library of Science integrates both of these things on their site. So this is a research article. Right up here they have the number of views, that's the number of people that have looked at it on their site. It's citations, academic bookmarks, and then the social shares that have happened. And across the top here, you can see you click on this for metrics and get even more information about that article. And this one should be live. So if I click on metrics here, it has quite a bit of detail on the number of page views, downloads, totals, downloads, article views. And then down here is where it's showing you where they're getting the information, where it's being cited, either in Scopus, Crossref, through Google search, site you like, Facebook, Mendeley, and on down. And this is a fairly recent article. Then all the detail about it. So I think Public Library of Science, and probably William talked about this as well, they've really tried to integrate all of these various alternate metrics to really make their open source journals be available. So some of the other examples I wanted to show you was in Scopus. They partnered with altmetrics, something I mentioned earlier. So on the page for this article in Scopus, a little box appears on the right-hand side that shows you right away, in addition to the citation information they're giving you, the standard citation information, they're giving you the number of Googles, 4 tweets, 3 site you like bookmarks, and 329 Mendeley. And I think there's like 47 citations. So clearly this article has a lot more social impact out there. It's new, 2011, getting a lot of people downloading it to read it. Fewer people are yet getting around to writing the paper to actually have the citation counted. So these are the two ends of the spectrum that we're talking about. And it really makes a difference when you're reviewing the article. In Science Direct, they've developed their own little app to run to pull up the top articles in your results set. So my search was for optogenetic tools, and on that results set, it was showing me not only those full text articles, but this little box appeared saying, the ones with the highest reads in Mendeley, you might want to consider, here they are. In addition to being able to sort those in Scopus by the number of times cited. But certainly none of them had 133 reads. was the highest. There weren't any 133 citations yet. These are all very current research happening. But it really made me think, oh, this one, I better look at this one. Look at how many reads it has. So I tell my grad students, it's like an early warning system. Like, what's really out there? What do you need to know about? So this is the list of sources that I reviewed for this presentation. Will be in there for you to click on and get access to. Altmetrics. Is it a little bit clearer now? Okay. All right. So I'm going to do a brief thing on Zotero because I do want you to know about that too. And then we'll move to Mendeley. So, Zotero. So a brief history of Zotero. It was started and created by a university in Virginia, George Mason University, and they were really looking for a way to have their researchers be able to manipulate the citations they were gathering in many sources, including EndNote and RefWorks and other. However, it didn't make Thomson very happy. They ended up suing them and saying, and the state of, and the Commonwealth of Virginia, you have to stop doing this. You are reverse engineering our proprietary code. And George Mason said, no, I don't think so. Plus, we're going to cancel our EndNote subscription. And we feel that whatever we're doing by the researchers should be their own property, and they should be able to move it from one source to another as easy as possible. So the case was finally dismissed, and Thomson decided, not to pursue it. And if you've seen any stats on the great migration of people off of EndNote into other things, or off of RefWorks and other things, you'll understand that this was a big money-making thing for Thomson, and not so much anymore. So it's free, everyone, on the web. So that was the first thing. Free, okay. And you get 100 megabytes of storage. Now, if you need more, if you have more citations, you think you could pay. But everyone starts out with free, so that's good. And it works with open office documents as well as Word to create a plugin into your word processing program to help you write the paper and insert the citations in the correct format, print your bibliographies, does all of that. It also is really good at capturing stuff on the web. Center for New Media was all about doing research on web-based tools and journalism students, history, that sort of thing. A lot of different languages. And the ability to create groups and share content. Again, getting back to that, how are we doing to collaborate on our research? So it's quite revolutionary at the time. This is kind of a screenshot of what it looks like. Pretty easy to use. Collect, organize, cite, sync. And they call it a personal research assistant. So if there's somebody that that's kind of needing to keep track of things, it might be a good thing to recommend that they start using because they can try it out for nothing, as opposed to having to invest in a subscription to EndNote or RefWorks. Lots of quick start guides, and it puts the information on your desktop as well as storing it in the cloud. So you can work anywhere, get your references, add things to it because it's a web-based tool, but you also have your own things locally to work with. So you can be disconnected from the web. That wasn't true on RefWorks, for example. You have to be able to be connected up to use it efficiently. So they've now made it so it works well with all browsers. Originally it was a plugin for Firefox, but the new version, Zotero 3.0, works for all of them, Mac, Windows, Linux. And it gives you a little icon in your toolbar to help you download either article information, book information. Works well with Google Scholar, So, of course, a lot of our students just love to death because they can get access to it from free. This is an example of doing a EBSCO host search. And you see up in the corner, can't quite reach it with my finger, there's I drew a circle around the little icon that looks like a yellow file folder. So you would click on that, it brings up this box of the articles that are on the page that you're looking at, and you just check the ones you want and click OK, and then it puts those into your Zotero library. So it's very, very clever with it. Innovated that. And of course, Mendeley here does many of the same sorts of things, use some of the same source code. Yes?
Is it putting full text there or just the information?
In this case, it's bringing the information, the citation, and then you need to do step 2 to download the article. It depends on the source that you're working with. Mendeley does a better job of that, bringing the full text. But for our students, we let them know what's available, and depending on their major, they may prefer this rather than, because they do a lot of web, scraping stuff off the web, they prefer this. Okay, so I'm done with my part. And while we switch computers, be happy to answer any questions. Helen? Yes?
Altmetrics focuses only on scientific content.
No.
No.
Just those are my science examples, but
Right.
no.
So they do social sciences,
Oh, yes.
history,
Yeah.
full
Yeah.
range.
Yeah. But since, I work in a sciencey kind of place. And so I think I did I'm working with the freshman classes doing all these things on genetics, and so they were really curious about optogenetics, and I went, what is that? So then, no, my files say optogenetics on them. But yeah, it works in all disciplines, and I'm sure William can show you that. Yeah. Yes?
So if I have an article and I want to know what's its impact, I can understand that.
Yes.
I was more interested in that Science Direct thing about the top article, so I'm looking more at the discovery side.
Right.
So what's in this area, what's good or what's hot.
Right.
So you have
And that, yeah, and that's definitely what these tools and
Right,
the search capabilities within Mendeley really send you there.
So,
And that's what that's why I mentioned that earlier, that I tell the grad students that this is. I mean, when I first heard about it, I just went, whoa, this is like revolutionary. It's totally letting you know what people are reading and thinking about before they even write the paper. Mm-hmm. It's like walking down the hallway and your advisor says, hey, you just see the article by so-and-so on the latest in what's-its, and you go, better write that down and go look it up. But this is a tool that will help you find that out ahead of time.
the downside that I see is what's hot is not necessarily what's read. I mean,
That's true.
There was that quote by Sidney Brenner 30 years ago saying, people don't read anymore, they Xerox.
Oh yes, that's true. That is true.
And now it says people don't read anymore, they download.
Yes, right.
So,
yeah. You do get, number of downloads and all that,
Right,
yes.
right,
And you are messing a big
so
thing.
So
but,
it's
yeah, that's true.
you can't go.
Right.
There are some upsides to it too.
Cool. Okay.
So I just wanted to talk a little bit about Mendeley and sort of where we came from and how we put together a system to gather these kinds of metrics, which are proving to be more and more useful. And one of the recent studies done by the Jason Cream and their group showed that there's actually a really reasonably good correlation between our readership and the eventual citation count of that paper, which isn't true for some of the other metrics. The interesting point there is that you're revealing kinds of sources of impact, like you said, that aren't reflected at all in citations, impact on the public and practitioners, small businesses and such. So we are a bunch of researchers at Mendeley. The original idea was come up with by Victor Henning and Jan Reichelt in Germany when they're working on their PhDs and their diplomas, and they were just trying to solve the problem that they had of how do we effectively share, papers and annotations on the papers and the metadata about the papers and all this kinds of stuff. And really, when you think about it, for any given research topic, when you put together a collection of all of the papers that you think are important, there's probably, this has probably been done 20 to 200 times all over the world, but other people study whatever little tiny niche topic you have. So now that we have the web and everyone can collaborate, wouldn't it be great if we could all just collaborate kind of in one central collection of like, this is the, canonical repository of all of the, whatever research articles. So the way that we did that is we built a bit of desktop software, and it runs on PC, Macs, Linux, and we also have clients now for Android, iOS things, and even the Kindle. And whenever you're using these to search for, download, and add research to your library, we synchronize that stuff with our service. We create canonical metadata representations and make a web page for each of those documents. And then each of those actions that you've taken related to a given document or researcher or institution, because there's many nodes in the influence graph beyond just the paper. There's lots of other things. It's all aggregated together and associated. And critically, the input that we get from all of these sources comes from the domain experts themselves. So they're the ones tagging the papers, they're the ones downloading it, they're the ones sharing it. And they have a profile on our site that lists, their kind of little online CV. So there's a lot of detailed metadata associated with each of those usage data points as well. This is kind of how we think of what we've done conceptually. It's kind of like we've attached a little measurement device to the research workflow overall. People might start their research with a search. They'll find papers, they'll read them, they'll annotate them, they will organize them in folders, which is an act when done by an expert that conveys information. And then they'll, later on down the road, write papers about them. And we can see things happening at each of these points. And because we integrate with the word processor, we can actually see what citations people are going to cite. Well, that isn't surfaced in the public data. And one thing I should say when talking about this is all of our data is aggregated anonymously. You can't go on there and find out, that Professor X is reading, papers X, Y, and Z. But you can look at an individual paper and see how many readers it has, roughly, where they are in the world, what their academic status and disciplines are, that kind of thing. This is an example of what the profile data. So this is just me. I've got a research field. I've tagged myself with some disciplines and that sort of things. I've listed publications that I have, and here I have some contacts. I've joined some public groups, and there's more obviously to this. And so this is kind of interesting because not only are you getting download information from it, but you're actually if you use this to kind of serve as a self-serve reprint request system or a place to self-archive your work, then you can use it as a place to promote, better dissemination of your work, because these pages are indexed by Google Scholar as well. Just as an example of the scale that we're now working at, we've crossed over 2 million users now. We're getting north of 500,000 document uploads every single day with individual documents. So it's really quite a challenge that we have to organize. The whole idea then is to, behind altmetrics and how we interface with this, is to get better data on what's working for individual researchers, what's having an impact on them, to get it faster. And my thing about altmetrics is, I think ultimately, this is something that really gives the researchers more academic freedom In the UK, they're very, very worried with this sort of research excellence framework of altmetrics and so on and so forth, because they're thinking that it's going to constrain them. But my argument there is that they're already being assessed. Why not be assessed based on better data that allows you to get more credit for more kinds of impact that currently was not considered in the past? And particularly for younger researchers, wouldn't it be better to have more rapid feedback that you can use to claim kind of credit for things? So you don't have to write a paper. Maybe you spend a whole lot of effort developing this analysis code for geospatial data, or maybe you spent a huge amount of effort curating a data set about something. You don't have to write a paper just to get credit for doing that. Impact Story will track, the number of forks you have on GitHub and the number of views your presentation has on SlideShare and all these things. A much more expanded universe of impact than you had before. And personally, I think we can shorten this. We can shift this back much further, and if we can do that, if you can take what's being studied and worked on and move it closer to translation into deployment, then you're going to save people's lives, right? So what we've done with all of this data is we have it available on the web for anyone to view in the search or catalog. We also have put a modern API behind all of this data, so you can query this data programmatically from any programming language that you like, and fetch this data, build it into applications. This is all free. There's an open license, CC BY, and all of the metadata that we have. And now what we've recently started doing is to work with institutions such as Stanford and the Harvard Center for Astrophysics and the Smithsonian and a number of other institutions to aggregate these metrics on an institutional level. So the idea is that you kind of have a Google Analytics specific to your institution for what's going on in the research world. And so you can see this is just from a sample group that we built, a demo group that we built in Mendeley for an institution. You can see the aggregate readership levels of, let's say, +1, science, and nature. And this is composed of all of our Mendeley advisors all over the world. So it's 600 or 700 at the time this was made, academics from all over. And +1 is definitely creeping up in there. You can also see the readership of people at your institution. This is just showing an aggregate level, but you can get this at an individual researcher level. And people are finding that really, really useful for including in their their tenure review packets and things like that. So the USC School of Pharmacy is currently doing a big thing they call March metrics, and they're doing this big thing on it to
Kind of the March Madness.
trying to incentivize their researchers to pay attention to these broader impacts and to do more things to get their work out and just share it openly. And they're looking into this a lot. Now, she has already talked to you a lot about impact stories, so I don't need to necessarily go into a lot of detail about this, but I think impact story is really, really great. And they're one of the first people to show that there are several dimensions to impact. So a given paper might have a whole lot of citations and not a whole lot of shares. It might have a whole lot of shares of bookmarks and not a lot of citations. When they looked at the readership activity of a very large corpus of documents and clustered them together, they found 4 different distinct groups within those using a principal components analysis. They really collapsed down into the 4 dimensions, and one of them was the traditional academic paper that's kind of cited and bookmarked by colleagues. Then there was another dimension was the well, I don't really know how to describe the topic, but basically, the +1 papers on the role of fellatio in bat, sexual, evolution, things like that, things that are the randomized, controlled trial of parachute effectiveness, these sorts of things that have tremendous numbers of, tweets and, Facebook's likes and all these kinds of things. Not really nearly as many citations for those. But this is,
BMJ Christmas issue.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's an amusing example, but what they found that there's this whole dimension of impact that research work is having that has totally been missed by the traditional citation-based measures. And so, altmetric.com, the neat thing about the PLOS article level metrics thing is that they're not just showing you the number of downloads of PLOS papers. They're actually going out into the web and trying to actively find the kind of the broader impacts that this content has had and bring that in. And they have all of their code available. So if you wanted to get some of their article level metrics tracking code, you can get it yourself and you can run your own local install of it. It's really kind of cool. You touched on this issue about metrics for discovery, and I think that's a really important part because people think, when they think of metrics, they kind of narrowly think of it in terms of assessment, or popularity, like you were saying earlier. But really, it's very, very useful as a discovery tool because you can see patterns in readership, you can see patterns in readership within specific disciplines, and then build that into a tool like we've done to actively suggest to people papers they might want to look at based on the current paper they're reading. And in our case, in our desktop client, we have a tool called Mendeley Suggest that looks at your reading history relative to the reading history of other researchers like you and says, you don't have this paper in your library, but several other folks that have a similar reading library like yours do. Perhaps you'd like to check it out. And so when we built this as an iterative learning system, we first started to roll it out. People were accepting, you can accept or reject the recommendations. People were accepting maybe 10%. And so we rolled that out to a small group of folks, our advisors, tweaked it a little bit, made a larger release of it, and we got up to about 40%. Now we're up to 90% acceptance for the recommendations that we make across our entire user base. So it's really become quite a useful tool. I like to think of it as like searches that you just haven't thought of running yet, right? Kind of, things that you would probably search for if you knew the right term, or that you're going to search for next week. Or when someone mentions that paper to you in the hall that you hadn't, crossed your radar yet. That's when you're going to go get it. And this is a way of proactively going out and finding those things and saying, here, pushing them at you actively. And then the other dimension to this, the other kind of layer of social signals. So when I think about the world of altmetrics, there's one layer of data, which is the metadata that describes a journal article or a researcher, the journal that he publishes in, the page number, that sort of thing. Then there's a layer of attention over that, how many times is it being read or downloaded. And then there's kind of the social layer of metadata, who is he sharing it with, and what describes those people, and how many comments have been made on an individual paper. And so moving up to that kind of social metadata layer, there's a whole lot of things with going out and finding commentary on Twitter about papers, finding blog posts about papers, and soliciting reviews about papers, because people are doing lots of reviews of papers all the time, and it's just not being captured into one place where it's really, really useful. And there's one thing called Paper Critic, which is an attempt to be a place where you can aggregate commentary about a paper. There's lots of other similar projects around that. Essentially, this is a mechanism for post-publication peer review, leveraging the strengths of the web. Right? And then to go one step further beyond that into the realm of the lofty semantic web and Web 3.0 and all this craziness. What if, instead of just having an A cites B relationship between papers, you had a relationship where you could say, this paper extends a method used in the previous paper, or this paper is a criticism of that one. And what we're actively involved in at Mendeley now is going through the papers that we have, extracting out entities within that, so gene names, names of planets, names of places, names of people, and linking those things together so you can run really interesting searches like show me all the papers that this guy is mentioned in or that refer to this particular place without just having to do a keyword match. And you can do the faceted kind of search with these things, and then you can actually connect these things based together. So you could go on the web and you could be looking at a tag for, let's say, the trastuzumab, the drug I showed earlier. You could see that people have also tagged those papers with Hexian, which is a side effect of people that are treated with that. And so it's kind of a whole alternate dimension of navigating the literature that people have really never delved into before, that we're finally getting to where we can start to tap. So thanks everyone for listening to my brief exposition about this stuff, and now Helen and I are happy to discuss altmetrics and Mendeley or whatever else.
Yeah. What do you think?
How far back was it?
How far back?
Yeah, no, I'm thinking of old articles. I realize that they're less reliable in terms of social media and these other things for older articles. But what would be a starting point? Would you say for an article where you get a good basis of the discussion, what's going on now for an article? Would it be 2011, 2012?
Jason Crean has looked at his activity data. They've aggregated an impact story, and they say that they have pretty good, significant data going back as far as 2012. Because people, the articles do have long half-lives, some of the bigger ones.
Right. Some of the history ones I don't realize, but I'm just saying they haven't had the same social media impact from some of the older.
Not from the start, right? And so what you see with the PLOS data, if you look at it carefully, is that a lot of papers will get downloaded or tweeted right after they come out, a whole lot, and then they'll have sort of a tail of activity with little bumps later on when new developments in that field happens. And so what happens now with these papers that come out after that, you're just getting that tail end of the things. You're not getting the initial stuff. But what they do with impact story, which I think is really, really smart, is they only compare that paper to the other papers that came out in that same period of time. So they can give you a percentile ranking for a given paper relative to its peers.
Science citation index did that with the impact factor and the radius index. That was I'm more concerned now about the, because I work for pharma, we are a very regulated, very IP-driven industry. We're not free and easy. So what's our place in it? I mean, could we use it? What kind of fences can you put around it or not?
Well, obviously, pharma would be very interested in having people not know, what they're currently delving into, right?
But on the other hand, they would be interested in knowing what other people think of them.
Which we don't do, but they would be very much interested in that,
right.
And they would be critically interested in knowing whether or not a particular avenue of investigation is a really good one to be going down. And that's the reason I showed that example with the trastuzumab, because when they first started publishing academic papers to the point where they really started getting a lot of citations, it was 8 years. A tremendous long period of time that you could move something into the clinic and trying it out. You could more effectively triage the paths that you want to go down, and I guess get a higher hit rate for compounds coming out without having to try a whole bunch of things. There's a whole other dimension that I didn't get into tonight, looking at the reproducibility of research. There's some other things that are going on to look at the reproducibility of work to prospectively identify which things are more likely to be reproducible in terms of techniques or fields of study and that kind of stuff. So I think pharma what they should be doing is they should be looking at things like the reproducibility initiative, which is building these curated not curated subset, but the subsets of papers where researchers have opted their work in to be audited, saying, I think this particular research that I did is very, very reproducible. It's a good paper. I want to put this kind of up as in a collection of research on a topic that I think is going to make it the most reproducible, knowing that this collection might be audited, but when funds become available from pharma or something like that, to see what is the most reproducible stuff or what's the most useful stuff. So as an example, we went through 2012 PubMed and sent emails to about half of the authors that we could find contact details for, and asking them, basically creating Mendeley groups by saying, do you want to submit this paper to the reproducibility initiative? You click yes or no, and if they clicked yes, then we put their paper in this group in a separate group from the ones that were clicked no or that didn't respond. And what we've found is that without any of the replication studies actually being done on these papers, that the papers where people clicked yes have twofold higher readership than the papers where they clicked no, without any of the screening actually being done. So if pharma wanted to come along and say, well, show me all the papers in, let's say cardiovascular disease that have been opted into this initiative, right? I'm going to put us some money. We're going to do replication studies of these papers, not the whole vast thing of cardiovascular research, just this curated subset, and then take that data and use that to come up with a way of predicting which ones, based on the patterns that we find, reproducible and not. What things are more likely to be more reproducible, better to build a robust drug discovery program on. So that's what I think pharma should be doing, is investing in things like that. Not to go too far afield.
But it's interesting, like having all of this metadata available and being able to mine it for different purposes totally opens up a whole other avenues of discovery. I mean, that's the part that's why I call it disruptive technology. I mean, we're so used to seeing it. Okay, here's the paper. It's cited 5 times. Okay, that's probably good. But what about all these other relationships that are there buried in the paper?
Well, one of the big things in pharma is also KOLs, KOLs. And KOLs are the key opinion leaders. And identifying key opinion leaders is very difficult.
Right.
And I mean, I can see it too, like that.
Yeah.
Useful. Sometimes you have the old farts.
Right.
being passed on as key opinion leaders simply because they've been around so long, and they always have their name at the end of the paper, and so you know that they're important. But they might not be the new.
Yes.
The new lines.
What are the new?
What
are the new leaders? Where are they coming from? What's the interest?
Yeah, it's been shown time and time again that there's a certain amount of money in having some content and selling access to that content. But when you open it up, the economic impact that can be realized from opening that up and building on top of that, is 5 or 10 times higher. The thing is, it's not the people who were profiting in the first place that realize the later downstream economic impacts. Not always. Sometimes people are smart enough to actually not get disrupted by basically disrupting themselves. But obviously, the music industry wasn't smart enough to do it. They let Apple come along and do it to them. The newspaper industry, they're struggling and floundering. Academic publishing, well, I mean, it's looking like maybe some of them are starting to see the writing on the wall and say, well, maybe services as opposed to content really is the way that things need to go.
So I'm really fascinated that people are finding a scientific use for Facebook. I mean, it just, I hadn't actually thought of that before.
Well, I mean, I get a lot of pushback when I talk about the number of tweets that a scientific article gets. People are like, who cares if somebody's tweeting about a paper? That doesn't mean anything, but it does mean something if the key opinion leader in the field is tweeting about a paper, right? It means something when, 100 graduate students, maybe in a specific location, are tweeting about a paper. And these are all things that we can pick up on. We can pick up on very rapidly now with this technology. So that Facebook, out of all the signals, tends to be the lowest. There's the least amount of academic activity going on there, just because kind of where it started, like people go there to shop and like talk to.
Right.
Because it's like the non-work kinds of
Yeah.
stuff. It is silent over there usually. But,
LinkedIn might be more. LinkedIn might be more.
yeah, I mean, if they ever get their social game together, really, I think they're.
You didn't mention any of the nuts and bolts features of Mendeley itself. If people wanted to try it out, they still have a free version,
so,
right?
So there's a free version, and so it comes with a gigabyte of storage for PDFs. You can store as much metadata as you want. There's no limit on that. And you can create public groups and share metadata with as many people as you would like. If you want to create a private group and share PDFs with folks, the full text of the PDFs, and collaboratively annotate those documents, then you can create a group with one other person to kind of play around with it to see how it works. But if you want to create a large size group, like a journal club sized thing, then that's an upgrade for the larger group sizes. Stanford, with their institutional edition, has the upgrades that go for all of the Stanford FTEs. So that is a really useful, happy to talk to anyone out. We're obviously, this isn't limited to academic institutions. It works perfectly well for pharma as well. So let's see what else.
It's particularly good if you know researchers who their method of operating is to download PDFs like crazy to their desktop and then forget what they downloaded and don't rename them, and pretty soon they have a big mess.
Right.
So if they...
The desktop is not a problem, it's the shared drive.
Right. So then they, if you install Mendeley Desktop and just point it at your folder of PDFs, it will move them in and extract the metadata, create the citations.
Yeah, I can organize and rename them and do all this kind of look up metadata.
As I said, I see the copyright implications and the IP implications as being
You'd have to see
the biggest obstacle to anything being adopted by pharma.
Right. Well, I mean, so the privacy things, we can certainly, we've talked to some other big pharma companies, and we've been able to get them relatively, in a good place. If they're happy with the cloud, if they're not anti-cloud in general, then they're generally okay with us. You do run into people who are like, we don't want to leave anything, like no bits shall leave our network. And then it gets really, really difficult. But if they're happy with the cloud, they're generally happy with the level of privacy by default that we provide. And a lot of them are like, well, maybe we can do a little, some, public groups, but not too much, So it gives them that option, which is nice.
I'd be fascinated to know if anybody is using it individually within pharma, without telling the company.
And my indication is that all the places where we do have, pharma institutional subscriptions, is that it came very much from the grassroots kind of. Hey, we use this, we like it, let's actually use it officially.
I'm just thinking surveys of users to I mean, from our side to
Yeah, I could put you in touch with some folks. They're more into that.
So what about copyright for the non-academic population? Because the academicians have a different sense of copyright than the private sector. How does that work with you all?
Well, I mean, the way copyright works in our system is that you don't get access to any copyright protected content unless you have a subscription.
You already have the
right?
Because you're
You can.
sharing the metadata.
Yeah, you're sharing
Same.
metadata in public groups. You can create private groups, and you can invite people to those private groups, and you can have the full text of materials in there, right? But that's really no different than what a researcher could do with email, right? They can email a PDF to someone. What we're providing is a limited scope, not wide open like email, and we're providing better tools. And so a lot of the publishers that we talk to about this, they're initially like, wait, you're allowing, this sort of sharing. We're like, wait, they're already emailing it. This actually cuts down kind of open-ended sharing and lets you see actually what's happening after that PDF gets downloaded in terms of the usage of your content. And then they're like, oh, it actually is kind of useful. So very, very good positive relationships with publishers, and even the Elsevier's and Springers and Wileys of the world. So are totally cool with what we're doing, and know in detail what we're doing with it. So did that address your question?
Kind of, sort of. But just because we subscribe to something doesn't mean we own the rights to be able to share it. And so those are two different things. So I'm wondering if you're working with the Copyright Clearance Center or with special licensing agreements with the publishers.
No, we haven't integrated with any rights clearance systems or anything like that. What we may do is to work with individual publishers to set up arrangements of here's how our groups work, and here's how the sharing works on our systems. We'd like to give you the ability to make it easier for institutions that subscribe to your content to collaborate together, so that they can share things within private groups without restrictions. Right now, we don't have any of that rights information, so you have to personally have access to a document to be able to get it. But once we can recognize someone's at an institution and we know what license they have, then we can say, okay, well, both of you guys have rights to this, so you can both, share this without the limits and restrictions we currently put on it. So that's where we're going with that. Very much not going the individual copyright clearance per document kind of thing, because it's just not scalable the way we want.
Yeah, well, there's a whole license agreement that you can buy that'll cover everything instead of an individual article. It might be something to look into if you want to spread out beyond the academic environment.
I think working with individual publishers is probably going to be a better route for us than going through the CCC, but we'll see how that goes.
What's the administrative burden like for you, managing all of this?
Well, the institutional edition advantage was that we could upload our journals holdings list and then be able to enable to find it at Stanford linking, so it would be easier for students to discover the papers if someone shared the metadata that they could then get the full text. So that wasn't uploaded by the acquisitions electronic librarian person. And then we worked with Mendeley to set up a self-subscribe link, so it would recognize that they are within the Stanford IP range, and then ask for their Stanford authentication, username and password to allow them to self-register. For about a month or so there, I had to register everybody, so I was happy to get out and put it out.
They were one of our very early
early adopters, so
adopters,
leading
and work out a lot of things.
Right, but that was good.
It's gotten a lot smoother.
Right. Here's a suggestion. Listening to lots of suggestions at the beginning. But we currently have about not quite 700 members of the med school. I was flooded with requests. I've heard about this, get me in. They just all jumped on it right away. And they really loved it. Surprisingly to me, that other departments on campus, economics, education, They come all the way across campus to the workshops that I give, and it's a pass down from grad student to grad student. First thing you do, get your Mendeley account, you know, so it's something that's really been a groundswell, as you point out. You know, they start using it, they love it, they tell 10 of their best friends, and then goes that way. It's a little bit of a harder sell on some of the older faculty. I even have somebody that's still using, wait for it, ProSite. And he won't do anything else with ProSite. He's like, really?
I love ProSite.
What's your user's last name? So that they know him.
I was one of the very first to use personal bibliographic software, which was the very first on the Mac, which then morphed into ProSite.
But and then a lot of our science grads compose and required to compose in LaTeX and BibTeX, and Mendeley works really well with that. So it's been a real big solution for a lot of physics students. I just pointed at my hard drive and let it run all night. Oh, okay, good. Finally got organized. Thanks so much. So they really need this kind of a tool. It really was a good solution for us.
You said that finding at Stanford takes them to Mendeley, or?
No, it takes them to our subscription to the journal.
Okay.
But if someone sends them a link, or they see a link doing a search on Mendeley, because now they have how many 40 million plus articles or something. So 60 million now. You can search Mendeley
So within
for articles.
Mendeley, there's a
Yes.
Yeah.
And so there's a little drop-down box, find this in Google Scholar, find it at Stanford, and so they can get to the citation, from the citation to the full text. Because that's really what.
So usage, it's on,
Yeah.
on the publisher system.
Right, yeah. So they're going for that.
And another thing I guess that we didn't talk about a whole lot is from the catalog page to link out to the document. If they're starting their search on Mendeley, but if they're searching another catalog or something, we're pretty good at going out and finding the full text if they already have access to it and automatically attaching it. We had some problems for a while working with Xcode, and those have just been fixed. If we never ran into an issue with Xcode, should be working on it. And yeah, we're just continuing to kind of,
But even on the Wiley Journal site, and you're reading an article and you want to download it, there's a little Mendeley bug there. You just click on that and just So more and more of these aggregated journal publishers are saying, hey, let's do more than just give them a RefWorks download or a RAS download.
Yeah, which is just fine for Mendeley, by the way. You can pull things in via RAS if that's what they give you.
Yeah, and the top journals, the top articles, the top downloads has become very common when you go to the publishers. And again, the fact of having a central tool for discovery, I think that's central.
Yeah, and then on that same page where you can read a snippet of the article, then there are the boxes with related articles, other articles by this author, again, within the whole Mendeley environment of metadata that people have uploaded. And I had students comment on this. Oh, it's telling me I should look at these papers. Oh, well, that's they really are kind of liking that actually. So, of course, it doesn't work too well for me because I download stuff depending on what class I'm teaching. So it thinks I'm in all subjects. But I could see if you're really trying to concentrate on one area, it would help.
So when you search Amazon.com
Exactly.
for gifts,
Yeah,
then suddenly you're getting all this. I'm not interested.
So the metadata that's being downloaded or sucked up, is that from a taxonomy or is it taxonomy, or where does that come from?
So the metadata comes from a couple of different sources. When you add a PDF, the first thing we'll do is we'll look within the we'll look at the file and see if we have that file already in our system, just by looking at the fingerprint of the file. If we can't find that, we'll look within the document to see if it's got its own metadata embedded in the PDF. And we'll use that if it's reasonably complete. If that's not good, we don't like how complete it is, then we will look for a document identifier, like an ID or a DOI, in the full text, and use that to look it up from Crossref or whatever. Failing all of that, we have an algorithm that will go through the PDF and try to figure out what is the title or the authors, etc., and pull that stuff out.
That's the magic. Really. It's like,
Yeah, like some obscure conference paper.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
with conference proceedings, sometimes I do get garbage access. But it allows you to go ahead and verify it yourself. It flags it with another color to know that, you know, this is missing data or I'm not sure of the data.
And then when the next person goes to add that paper, they're going to see that it's already been added.
Already been verified.
Yeah.
So again, it's using the, as you said, it's putting some faith in the domain experts that are putting content into their files as well, you know, and leveraging that for the benefit of everybody.
So what we're planning to do with the metadata is obviously we have some metadata that's been looked up and it's come from Crossref or come from PubMed or some other canonical source. We have some things that have been extracted. We've actually got tiers within our catalog of metadata quality. And so what we're planning to do is to look at the contributions according to who submitted them. Obviously, if an author submits metadata, then if the author of a paper submits metadata, we take what he says as being the gospel. But
One hopes.
yeah, right. But also, if someone is a librarian and they contribute metadata for a set of articles, we can treat their the version of the document, the version of metadata they upload different from the metadata that may have been extracted out and not corrected, right? And we can also just look at consensus. If a given document's been uploaded 100 times, and 80% of the time this one particular field has it this way, and then there's all these other variants for the other 20%, you can take that 80% on a by field basis. So we do a lot of that kind of stuff.
There was always a problem with citation indexes, the fact that the citations vary.
Right.
You have to
Yeah.
go up and go down and go sideways,
Right.
and books, so you could forget about it.
So you retain historical, past submissions, so you have more than one citation, the 2080. So
Right, yeah. So we get all kinds of uploads. We get PDFs that people have annotated in third-party annotation tools. We get PDFs with cover pages put on them when they did the download. It's different for every download. We get a whole range of things. We get postprints, preprints, and very, very active work going on to try to cluster all of those and segregate them out. And so we're really pretty good at the. I've actually written a couple of papers from our data science team on the near exact matching of documents. And we've gotten really pretty good at that in terms of taking a set of similar papers and then being able to fractionate them out into this is exactly the same paper. This is the the preprint of that paper. We're not quite there yet, but
if a subscriber uploaded a preprint version from ScienceWeb for some reason, and then they wanted the version that actually has the pagination,
it needs to be treated as separate documents in our catalog, most likely, depending on how different they are.
I missed the first part.
So they'll be treated as separate documents in our catalog, most likely.
What if someone uploads a paper that they don't have a subscription to?
So no one's going to get access to that paper because publicly you can't download you can't download any stuff that we don't know is open access.
Well, like if someone emailed you a paper that you don't subscribe to,
right,
and you try to upload it.
You can put it in your Mendeley library, sure, but you can't then, and you can share that private groups, but you can't. There won't be then a public catalog page with a download link for that, unless the person viewing that page is at a subscribing institution. So yeah, you know, a few years down the road when everything is open access.
I'll be here the news on Friday.
Fantastic news. Fantastic news. It would make things technologically a whole lot easier and make our product way better. Being able to like drop that public-private, you know, where you, so you could just keep things private if you actually wanted to not reveal what you were reading, as opposed to this sort of arbitrary. Well, you know, yes, I know that you worked in this guy's lab, but I can't share it with you. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I was thinking earlier. Okay, we had a subscription 5 years ago, but we don't anymore.
Yeah.
Can we still access our archive?
Well, I mean, all of the PDFs that you have, they're not going to go anywhere. They're not doing it, revoking full text from people's catalogs and things like that. And don't plan on doing that. Really, we've been successful so far by thinking of, you know, when I was a researcher back in the lab, what did I want a tool to do? And focusing on that, not so much on like, you know, honestly on like, how do we make sure that we, you know, are not in any kind of legal liability for anything that we, you know, any of the stuff that we're doing, because quite frankly, we are taking risks, you know, but for the people that have had the choice of do we work with these guys or do we sue them, they've all wanted to work with us so far. So, you know, we're just going to keep going with that.
We like President Obama's directive better than we like the Congress's bill.
Yeah, so I mean,
12 months is better than 6 months. Embargo.
And 6 months, in my opinion, you know, 0 months would be better than 12 months in my opinion. But I think we'll eventually get towards that. I mean, what people are finding, looking at this kind of data, is that having your research openly accessible and available increases your impact, right? If you look at that same set of 2012 PubMed papers and you look at the open access papers versus not, there is like 2.3 more readers per open access paper than non, and that's for all of 2012 PubMed. And you know, a few years ago when these studies were done, there was just a slight advantage, you know, like 1 or 2%. And now, when we look at readership, it's much greater, and the trend is continuing, you know, wider gap. And you're going to hit a tipping point where most content is available open access to stuff that is a minority, and that's really when the major shift is going to happen. The total output of Elsevier in 2012 was something like 240,000 papers. The total output of PLOS One, just that one journal, this year is projected to be 120,000. So the tipping point is.
And that's a golden one.
Yep. Yeah, the goal of open access. That's right.
Yeah.
So any more questions, or should we? Yeah, I want to thank both of you, and I want to thank the rest of the committee, because it does take a village to put one of these things on. And Phil and Kathleen kindly brought the food, and Helen found the location. So there's a lot of, and Margot has been doing registration, so we appreciate all that, and we're very glad you came. Thank you.